picture this. It's September 23rd, 2020.
Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals.
Exactly. And the entire world is, well, it's upside down. The games are being played in this eerily quiet, fanless bubble up in Edmonton.
Yeah, just an incredibly weird atmosphere for hockey.
Right. And a player who has missed the entire playoffs up to this point due to a core muscle surgery, he steps onto the ice.
Out of nowhere, basically.
Right. He skates for exactly 2 minutes and 47 seconds. And in that brief window, he takes one single shot. He scores.
And then he leaves the game forever.
He never plays another shift in that series. That player is Steven Stamkos. And that sequence was famously dubbed by his teammate Victor Hedman as the best 3 minutes of playoff hockey you'll ever see.
Which is just a legendary quote.
It really is. So welcome to today's custom-tailored deep dive designed specifically for you.
We are so glad you're joining us.
Today, we are immersing ourselves in the career of Canadian ice hockey center Steven Stamkos. We've got a comprehensive stack of biographies, stats, and historical breakdowns sitting right in front of us.
A lot of ground to cover.
Tons. The mission of this deep dive today is to extract the blueprint of his career. We want to understand how he evolved from a heavily hyped teenage draft pick into a 60-goal sniper.
And how he survived that horrific string of injuries.
Yes, by completely altering his tactical approach. And finally, we're going to look at how the cold math of a hard salary cap ultimately dismantled a legacy.
It's a fascinating arc.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to truly understand the mechanics of his career, we have to go back to the summer of 2008 when the pressure in Tampa was, it was absolutely suffocating.
It was. You have to remember the state of the Tampa Bay Lightning at that specific time. They had just finished a season with an NHL worst 31 wins. Yeah, they were a struggling franchise desperately in need of a spark. Enter Stamkos. He had just torn up the Ontario Hockey League with Sarnia, putting up 105 points in 61 games during his draft year.
So he was the undisputed #1 prospect.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
The Lightning drafted him first overall, but they didn't just ease him into the lineup. They built an entire regional marketing campaign around an 18-year-old kid.
Right, the billboards.
Exactly. They plastered the Tampa area with billboards, signs, bumper stickers, all bearing the single slogan, "Seen Stamkos."
Which is wild when you think about it. I mean, you haven't played a single professional shift, and your face is on billboards essentially declaring you the savior of a multi-million-dollar franchise.
The expectations were astronomically high.
And from what I'm looking at in our sources here, the reality of that rookie season didn't match the billboards at all. It was incredibly rocky.
Very rocky.
His first NHL game was over in Prague against the Rangers, and it took him 8 games just to record his first point. I know there was a lot of behind-the-scenes drama with head coach Barry Melrose. What was actually happening there?
It was a classic tug-of-war between old-school coaching and new-school management. Melrose, who was heavily criticized at the time, barely played the kid.
He had him on the 4th line, right?
Yeah, he was limiting him to less than 10 minutes of ice time a night in certain situations. Melrose's philosophy was that an 18-year-old needed to earn his ice time defensively before being handed top 6 offensive minutes.
So it was a real clash of mentalities.
Exactly. Stamkos finished that rookie year with a relatively quiet 46 points and a -13 rating, meaning he was on the ice for 13 more even-strength goals against his team than for his team.
So he's benched, he's struggling defensively, and the media is already, they're whispering the word bust.
Which is crazy for an 18-year-old.
Right. Most highly touted prospects might demand a trade or complain to the front office. But he teamed up with Gary Roberts that following offseason. What was it about that specific partnership that changed his trajectory so violently?
What's fascinating here is that you see the physical reality of making the jump from junior hockey to the NHL. In the OHL, Stamkos could rely on pure, raw talent and agility to skate around teenagers.
But the NHL is a totally different beast.
Completely. Suddenly, he was taking hits from 220-pound defensemen who had been playing professional hockey for a decade. So Gary Roberts, who had recently retired, was famous for his grueling, cutting-edge fitness and nutrition regimens.
And Stamkos went all in.
He spent the entire 2009 summer at Roberts' gym. But it wasn't just about doing push-ups. It was a total physiological rebuild.
Like breaking him down to the studs.
Exactly. They focused heavily on lower body explosiveness, core stabilization, and completely overhauling his diet to build lean muscle mass that could actually withstand an 82-game grind.
He realized his junior habits just weren't going to cut it anymore.
No.
Not at all.
And there's a really valuable takeaway in there for you, the listener.
Oh, for sure.
When you face a roadblock in your career, do you complain about the environment? Or do you fundamentally change your preparation? It's about recognizing when the tools that got you to a certain level are no longer sufficient to keep you there.
And having the humility to just completely break down and rebuild your foundation.
Precisely.
And the immediate payoff of that physical rebuild was explosive. In his sophomore year, the 2009-2010 season, all that lower body power translated into 51 goals.
He actually tied Sidney Crosby for the Rocket Richard Trophy.
Which is unbelievable. Suddenly, he is challenging generational talents. But we need to spend some time on the 2011 to 2012 season. He scores 60 goals.
A massive milestone.
I really want to emphasize how rare this is. In the high-flying 1980s, Wayne Gretzky or Mike Bossy scoring 60 was almost expected. But in the 2010s, Stamkos was the only player in the entire decade to hit that mark.
That contextualization is crucial. The 2010s were still heavily influenced by the remnants of the dead puck era.
Right, the goalies are getting huge.
Yeah, defensive systems had tightened up and goaltenders had fully perfected the butterfly style. They were wearing these massive, highly engineered pads that covered the entire lower half of the net.
So there was just no room to shoot.
None. Scoring 60 goals in that specific environment is arguably mathematically harder than scoring 75 in the 1980s. And what's even more impressive is that 48 of those 60 goals came at even strength.
So how did he do it? We know about his signature move, the one-timer from the left face-off circle, the spot everyone calls his office.
Very similar to Alexander Ovechkin's office.
Exactly. But if every goaltender in the league and every opposing penalty unit knew exactly what the Lightning were trying to set up on the power play, why couldn't they stop it?
It really comes down to elite biomechanics and the psychology of the shooter. The left circle is ideal for a right-handed shot like Stamkos because it opens up the angle to the net.
But lots of players stand there.
Right, lots of guys can stand in that circle. What made Stamkos different was the sheer quickness of his weight transfer. He could receive a pass that was in his skates, behind him, or bouncing.
And just fire it instantly.
Instantly. His body could adjust the flex of his composite stick to fire it off in a fraction of a second. Henrik Lundqvist pointed this out specifically.
Oh, what did he say?
He said it wasn't that the shot was the hardest in the league. It was that the puck was off Stamkos' blade before the goaltender could even push off their edges to slide across the crease.
Wow.
Furthermore, Stamkos was a master at reading the goalie's lateral movement. If a goalie started cheating toward the short side, anticipating the blast, Stamkos would subtly change his wrist angle to snap it back across the grain.
That is the definition of achieving true mastery. You find a highly specialized skill, and you refine the biomechanics of it to such a degree that it transcends anticipation.
It becomes indefensible.
Exactly. You can know it's coming, but the physics of the release beat human reaction time. But just as he reaches this absolute pinnacle of the sport, his body gives out.
And it was brutal.
It really was. And not just the standard hockey wear and tear. I want to dig into the reality of these injuries because the timeline here in our sources is staggering. Let's start with November 11, 2013 in Boston.
That was the turning point of his physical prime. He was back-checking, got tangled up with Dougie Hamilton, and slid feet first into the goalpost at top speed.
Ooh.
The impact completely fractured his right tibia.
Yeah.
If you look back at the footage, he actually tries to stand up twice on a completely broken leg before collapsing.
You adrenaline.
Yeah. He had to be carried off on a stretcher. And what makes it so tragic is he was tied for the NHL lead in goals at that moment.
And didn't that cost him the Olympics too?
It did. It cost him a spot on the 2014 Canadian Olympic team for Sochi.
And as awful as a broken tibia is, a bone usually heals. But what followed was this bizarre and terrifying medical gauntlet. In April 2016, he's diagnosed with thoracic outlet syndrome. Can you explain what that actually meant for him?
Yeah, so thoracic outlet syndrome in this context involved a blood clot forming near his collarbone due to compression of the veins.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It is life-threatening. It required a highly invasive surgery where they literally removed the top rib to alleviate the pressure on the vein.
They removed a rib.
Yeah. He had to go on blood thinners and missed almost the entire 2016 playoff run where the Lightning went to the Eastern Conference Final without him.
And he comes back from the rib removal, gets back on the ice the next season, and then in November 2016, he tears his lateral meniscus in his right knee, losing almost another entire year.
Just relentless bad luck.
And then the core muscle surgery in 2020. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the narrative around a player with a broken tibia, a torn knee, and core surgery is usually a rapid decline.
You usually just fade away.
Exactly. How did he not just fade into obscurity as a guy whose body failed him? Was his subsequent shift in playstyle a conscious choice, or was it purely survival?
It was an absolute necessity that required profound hockey intelligence. When you suffer those specific lower body injuries, the tibia, the meniscus, the core, you lose your first step explosiveness.
The burst is just gone.
The raw speed that allowed him to separate from defenders in 2012 was gone. But rather than stubbornly trying to play a speed game he no longer possessed, he evolved.
He adapted.
He transitioned from being the guy who finishes the play to the guy who orchestrates it. If you examine his 2021 to 2022 season, he put up 106 points.
Which is incredible production.
But the striking statistic there is the 64 assists. That was a career high by a wide margin. He realized that while his legs couldn't beat defenders down the wall anymore, his vision and anticipation were completely untouched by the injuries.
He rewired his entire operating system. He couldn't be the sports car anymore, so he became the traffic controller.
That's a great way to put it.
And that tactical evolution perfectly mirrors his evolution into the undisputed leader of this franchise. In March 2014, the team trades Martin St. Louis, who was the heart and soul of the locker room, to the Rangers.
A massive shakeup.
Huge! And they put the C on Stamkos' chest. Following a legend like St. Louis had to be an immense burden for a guy still in his early 20s.
It was, especially considering the Lightning had a growing core of immense talent coming up. Guys like Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, and Andrei Vasilevsky.
He had to become the foundational pillar.
Exactly. He had to shift from being the young phenom to the veteran presence. And it wasn't a smooth ride to the top. The Lightning suffered some historic playoff heartbreaks under his early captaincy.
Like the Columbus series.
Yes. Getting swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets in 2019 after winning the President's Trophy. That collapse is crucial context because it forced Stamkos to reshape the entire locker room culture. They had to learn how to play ugly, grinding playoff hockey.
Which brings us right back to the Edmonton bubble in 2020. The isolation, the daily testing, the complete absence of fans. Winning a Stanley Cup is a marathon in a normal year, but that bubble environment was a psychological pressure cooker.
Absolutely draining.
The Lightning go back-to-back, winning in 2020 and 2021, and making a third straight final in 2022. During that run, Patrick Maroon famously called Stamkos the heartbeat of the team.
It's the perfect word for him.
We know he won the Marc Messier Leadership Award in 2023, but I want to tie this back to the 2-minute and 47-second shift we opened with. Why is that specific moment viewed as the ultimate distillation of his leadership?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see that leadership isn't just about giving good speeches in the locker room. It's about visible sacrifice.
Putting it all on the line.
Every player on that 2020 roster knew Stamkos was essentially skating on one functional leg. He was not medically cleared to play a full game.
But he went out anyway.
Yes. By stepping onto the ice, taking that explosive stride past a Dallas defenseman, and ripping that shot into the corner, he was sending a physical message to his team. He was saying, I am willing to risk catastrophic, career-ending injury to give us a spark for 3 minutes.
Chills. You just can't quantify the psychological boost that gives a bench.
When your captain does that, no one else can complain about a blocked shot or a bruised rib. It sets an impossible standard of commitment.
It's the kind of loyalty and sacrifice that makes you assume a player is untouchable. You look at the resume, 2 cups, 555 franchise goals, 1,137 points.
He owns the record book.
He is the franchise leader in almost every offensive category and games played. He is the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is why the events of summer 2024 were so jarring to watch unfold. Let's elevate this discussion past the emotional shockwaves.
Sir.
Why couldn't they get a deal done? How does a franchise just let their heartbeat walk out the door?
To understand that, we have to talk about the brutal realities of the NHL's hard salary cap, especially the stagnant cap growth following the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's not like baseball.
Not at all. In baseball, you could just pay a luxury tax to keep your stars. The NHL cap is a hard ceiling. General manager Julien Brisebois had to operate purely on cold, forward-looking calculus.
He couldn't afford to be sentimental.
Right. By the summer of 2024, Stamkos was 34 years old. Brisebois was looking at standard NHL aging curves, which show a sharp decline in even strength production for players in their mid to late 30s.
So it's a math problem.
Tampa Bay needed top six production, but they also needed cap flexibility to retool an aging roster.
So it wasn't necessarily that they didn't want him. It's that they didn't want to pay him $8 million a year for past performance when they could spend that money on younger production.
Exactly. And that's exactly what they did. They cleared his cap space and aggressively signed Jake Guentzel, who is 5 years younger, in free agency.
It's just ruthless efficiency.
The ruthless efficiency required to keep a championship window open. If you pay for sentimentality in a hard cap league, you end up at the bottom of the standings very quickly. But the human element of that calculus is brutal.
Brutal is the word. So on July 1st, 2024, Stamkos signed a 4-year, $32 million contract with the Nashville Predators.
A massive shift for the league.
Connor McDavid, a guy who knows a thing or two about carrying a franchise, spoke about it shortly after. He said Stamkos gave everything to that city, got drafted when they were terrible, led them out of the cellar to cups, and that he should have been a Tampa Bay Lightning for life.
That quote really highlights the disconnect.
Yes, this massive disconnect between the player's view of loyalty and the front office's view of asset management.
And that emotional fallout was fully on display when he returned to Amalie Arena as a visitor in October 2024. The atmosphere was incredibly conflicting.
I can only imagine.
The Lightning played the requisite massive tribute video, and he took a solo lap to a deafening standing ovation. But then the puck dropped.
And it's back to business.
Well, in a very poetic twist, he recorded 2 assists for Nashville in that game. There were moments where the Tampa fans were actually cheering when the Predators scored, simply because it was Stamkos making the play.
It's such a surreal visual of home crowd cheering against their own salary cap interests because they are so tethered to the player.
It really shows his impact.
And he hasn't just faded away in Nashville either. It's worth noting, fast forward to New Year's Eve 2025, he scores his 600th career goal against Vegas.
Only the 22nd player in the entire history of the NHL to reach 600 goals.
So, what does this all mean? When you zoom out and look at this entire journey, it is a masterclass in adaptation. He didn't just survive the suffocating hype of being a teenage savior.
He learned how to completely rebuild his body with Gary Roberts.
Exactly. When his body betrayed him with broken bones and blood clots, he didn't quit. He rewired his brain to become an elite playmaker. And he proved that leadership is ultimately measured by what you are willing to sacrifice when the cameras are on and the arena is empty.
It's a phenomenal legacy of resilience. But as we wrap up our analysis of his career trajectory, this raises an important question, something for you to mull over after we sign off today.
Quite honest.
We just outlined the exact cold salary cap math that led to his departure. If a player like Steven Stamkos, a guy who actively took pay cuts during his prime to keep those championship rosters compliant, who physically bled for his city, and whose leadership defined a dynasty.
Yeah.
If a player with that specific resume can still be squeezed out in free agency for a younger asset, does the romantic concept of a franchise player for life even exist anymore in modern sports?
That is a fascinating and maybe slightly depressing question to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this custom deep dive. We hope you enjoyed extracting these insights as much as we did, and we'll leave you to explore that final lingering thought on your own.